All right, well, thanks for joining me. Again, I'm Brandon Barilli. I'm the Director of Residential Education at Hobart and William Smith Colleges, and this is our series on talking to practitioners in the field, people who are leading RA training at different institutions across the U.S., and find out really what they're doing creatively or differently in regards to RA training. So thanks for joining me. Do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your position?
Sure. So my name is Nekesa Straker. I am the Associate Director for Selection and Training here at DePaul University. And so, pretty much in that role, I'm responsible for all of the selection and training of both our professional staff and RA staff. So a large part of my position focuses on working with the RAs in terms of the process of selection, training them throughout the year, with a good amount of time focused in the summer training.
Great. Great. Well, can you talk about your time at your institution and what has necessarily been great for RA training, and what have you really seen change over the course of a few years?
Yeah, I really think I've had the opportunity. I came here about 2.5 years ago, so I've really had the opportunity to look at RA training from kind of like this macro level and just figure out what works, what doesn't work, and to really come up with a program that works best for us. So one of the first things I changed when I got here was we have a couple of different move-ins, and RA training was actually happening, still occurring when students were moving into the halls. And so I just, first thing I did was adjusted the timeline. So RAs, they did come back maybe like 4 or 5 days earlier than they had in the past, but adjusted it so that once RA training was complete, then that's when their residents were moving in. So they were done with training and just ready to jump in terms of building community with their residents. We also have tried over the years, I think it's mostly because many of us have been doing RA training for so long, so every year we try to make it a little bit different. So we've really tried different ways of making it interactive, going on retreats, utilizing online modules for some of our material that I would say might be a little boring to hear year after year, and really focusing on 3 main points or parts of training: having the RAs get to know themselves, having them get to know the position, and then helping them on their way as they get to know their residents.
Great, great. That seems like a really holistic approach, so that's good to hear. In regards to some of the sessions themselves or activities during RA training, what are some ways that you have infused that creativity or interactivity? What are some creative approaches to some of the mundane tasks that you mentioned?
Yeah, so just one example off the top of my head, we have a resource fair. So in the past, all the resources that are available to RAs on campus. So in the past, the RAs would sit in a room for 3 or 4 hours, and all these offices would come in and tell them stuff. After a while, people got restless. They didn't want to do that anymore. So we then transitioned to a resource fair. So we had just took a room, had a bunch of tables set up, all these offices were there, and then each RA had a responsibility to go talk to a specific office. They had questions they had to ask, and then come back with information into their individual halls. That got a little mundane as well. So then this year we switched it up even more and basically had basically like a resource hunt. So the RAs got clues. All the offices were actually in their offices. The RAs went to office. There was like maybe a 5-10 minute presentation. They got a clue, and then they were able to move on to the next location. So we switched it up a little bit to make it as interactive as possible, and it was also something where it was helpful for RAs to actually go to the places where these offices are located, so that they could actually interact in that environment. For a lot of them, they had never been to those actual locations. So it seems pretty basic, but at the same time, every year trying to do something just a little bit different to mix it up, because we also have, you can be an RA here basically for 3 years, starting in your sophomore year. So imagine, year after year coming back and experiencing the same thing over and over. Other things that we did just to switch it up a little bit in the past, some of our foundational documents, so learning about the mission statement, our values, our diversity statement, all of that, we would do a presentation where literally I would stand in front of the room with an associate director, and we would just talk. and we tried to make it interactive, but it was still, I was even bored doing the presentation myself. So there's always so much interaction you can do. So what we did, one of our ideas was to, after going to NASPA last year, was to, test out the waters in terms of online modules. So what we did was we created about 4 online modules for throughout the summer, which the RAs would have to participate in. So they're basically PowerPoints, also documents that they would have to read, and then at the end of each module there would be a quiz as well as discussion questions. So we took some of our kind of mundane material and put it on the online module so that they could read it at their own pace, do whatever they needed to do to understand it, and then when they came to RA training, we would touch upon it, but not in as much depth as we would have normally, because they've already had the time to look at it.
Okay, nice. So in regards to the actual training sessions themselves, how do you assess whether the students have taken away everything that you have meant for them to take away, the effectiveness of the training on behalf of the student outcomes, but also then maybe post-training, how have you evaluated satisfaction amongst the RAs, but also evaluated the entire training event?
Yeah, so we do what everyone else probably does. We do some kind of survey. So it's either a week at a time or daily. So we've done different ones basically throughout the last 3 years. Last year we stepped away a little bit from the actual fill out a bubble type thing, and along with the lines of the online modules, made it more interactive. So at the end of each day, they had questions that they had to respond to in their in-house staff. So it was basically kind of like reviewing the day, but also assessing what they've learned at the same time, more face-to-face. And that was also very helpful for the RD because they were able to see if something was missed, how they could make up for it in another session or another in-house session. So all of our trainings basically start with trainings with everyone together and end in some kind of in-hall session. So that's just very helpful to kind of assess from there. We also this year did small assessment projects. So taking behind closed doors, for example, we gave them basically a pre-test of questions that to respond to, and then after they participated in both behind closed doors, we gave them a protest. So that was basically a way for us to just see what they learned from before they started to after. So just trying, again, to mix up the assessment and just kind of the figuring out what they've learned a little bit more in a way that's not just like a basic Qualtrics survey. I think what we are also leading to do that we didn't get an opportunity to do this year, which I'm hoping we do next year, is think about training those 2 weeks, and then within the staff meetings, within the first 6 weeks, also think about the continued training. So we here have a competency-based tool that we use for all staff. So RAs, RDs, directors, assistant directors, and so it's based on 6 different tenets that we have within the department. And so the goal for next year is going to have each staff meeting within those first 6 weeks touch upon one of those tenets, which will be related to training, to help continue kind of like that learning and making sure that what they've learned is still sticking through and that they're still getting something out of it.
Nice. So you mentioned earlier the online component. That is, I'm assuming, is like a pre-employment before they arrive for RA training over the summer. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So what are some, so that seems to be a pre-employment training opportunity. Are there other pre-employment opportunities for them to engage as a member of the RA staff, maybe in the spring semester, or are there ongoing trainings such as like an RA class or an RA in-service model? Can you talk a little bit about your training outside of the traditional week?
Yeah, so we don't have, right now we don't have an RA class. We've looked into it. It's just a lot of work. And it's not necessarily just a lot of work on our end. It's a lot of work on, basically you have to attach it to a department or a professor who's willing to take it on. So it's just a little too much right now, and we haven't gone that avenue. That's why we created the online module. So it's just kind of a way to have that. We are hoping, because last year was our first year doing it, so we're hoping to take it beyond, and to hopefully have it be something that happens throughout the entire year. So now each RD used to have like individual Google emails or different things for their buildings. But now the way the online module system works, it's called D2L for us, a lot of people, Blackboard, that type of thing. So RDs, instead of saving their information in different folders, they now save everything on that D2L site. So if an RA needs to look at their duty schedule, instead of looking at a Google Calendar, they go to the D2L online module site. So we're able to make it more interactive as something that they go to. So if we, for instance, with all of the things going on with Ferguson and Garner, right before winter training, we created a Dropbox of articles and just different things that RAs can go to and to read before coming to campus for winter training. So we're trying to use it. The goal is that it's something that we can use throughout the entire school year, if it's not even if it's an active module, but if it's something that we want all the RAs to know, that they can easily go to that site to look up information. I send out monthly emails to RAs with updates, things going on campus. So I'll still send out a physical email, but then we'll also post it on the D2L site with all the links and all the articles so that they have it there as well as another resource.
Oh, great. Do you do in-services over the course of the year, once a month, or?
Yeah, so it's not as traditional as I'm used to. We do it once a quarter, and typically the one in the fall quarter is the most educational, but the ones in the winter and spring are more focused on things that have to get done. So the winter one is focused on group process and helping them prepare for that. The spring one is typically the meeting that we have with all the new staff that are hired, and then the staff who are not coming back have a second meeting where we basically do some kind of like exit interview, closing out of their experience.
Okay. So can you talk a little bit about diverse learners, multiple ways of RAs to be learning and classroom lesson planning and pedagogy? How do you incorporate the different methods that students learn in your everyday RA training, so that you're not doing what you mentioned earlier, the PowerPoint karaoke? How do you incorporate diverse learners in your planning for training?
Yeah, I really think this year, by incorporating the online modules and having people able to learn at their own pace. So one of the modules we also created was one for our residential education learning initiative, which is basically our programming model. And so it's very helpful to lay it all out as a Prezi PowerPoint online with a lot of information so that people could go to it at their own pace and go back if they needed to, review documents, and just kind of, really get their own handle on it before we brought it to the big group. So I think in general, a lot of our training, we do the lecture style, but we also do the round table style. We do a lot of, we're not always just sitting in the same room even. We try to mix it up to different spaces on campus just so people don't necessarily get bored of being in the same space. We do service projects, we do retreats, we do, like I said, the resource hunt. So we really just try to mix it up a little bit. We have third-year RAs who actually present on topics as well, so that it's not always just the pro staff that are up there. We utilize offices outside of residential education as well. We do some cross-training with some of our housing services staff, just again to mix it up, to have different people in the room, and then also that component of the in-hall time. So having each day end with the in-hall really is able for the students to really say whatever they want to say, review whatever they want, and just to have the downtime to process it.
Great. So that's the end of my questions for you. I'm wondering if there's one or two things that you want to share that you really were hoping to share and I didn't ask a question about, any unique things to your institution that you would love for other people to know.
Yeah, I mean, I really think I've talked about it a couple of times already, but the online module piece, when we started it, we were just like, oh, well, let's just see how this is going to go. But it really allowed us to, again, going back to that different learning styles, but also with the discussion questions we had, really allowed the RAs to have discussions with each other. Each person had to respond to something, and then the returners had to provide some kind of advice to the new staff as well. So it was just a really helpful way for people to interact. And so if you have the ability to do it, I think it's definitely a good thing to look into. I also think, treating training, I always say that each year is a new year. So it's good to definitely still have some pieces within your foundation and to continue to do year after year, but it's always good to mix it up. So the example of the resource fair having different stages, we also theme our training. I know a lot of times, people are like, the theme should be training, but it really, by allowing the RA staff to pick a theme, 2 years ago, the theme was the Res Ed World Tour featuring Beyonce, and it was hilarious, but they loved it. So, just little things like that can help keep up the momentum and just keep people driven and wanting to continue. So I would say online modules, switching it up every year if you can, and then also having some kind of theme.
Wow. Keeping that energy up, that's what we got to do. Well, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And would you mind if we put your contact information in case other people have questions about, say, the online module along with this video?
Yes, definitely my contact and my Twitter account.
Perfect. All right, thank you for joining. All right, see you next time.
Bye.